Rahui.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to speak to Part 22 of the Statutes Amendment Bill, namely Ngāti Manuhiri Claims Settlement Act, which corrects the legislation by deleting the words Crown Body with reference to RFR land. And before I speak to that, sir, and I do have a couple of questions for the Minister, but I think it's important to have on record the importance of right of first refusal land to settled iwi. This is land which is within the agreed area of interest for that particular iwi. It is Crown land that is owned by the Crown and under the current legislation also by Crown bodies. And this removes the words Crown bodies because in the deed of settlement it just refers to Crown. The important thing to note, I think, Mr. Chair, is that for the settled iwi, this is really important because it gives the opportunity to buy back land that they once owned and is now alienated. And I think it's important to recognise that in this discussion on this part of the bill. The questions that I have is, and to quote an interjection from Brett Hudson, why create law when none is needed? And my question would be along those lines, in support of what he's saying actually, is that did the government consider asking Ngāti Manuhiri to change the deed of settlement? And the second part of the question related to that is Ngāti Manuhiri better off or worse off by this amendment? And I think that's a fair question to ask because the nature of these settlements is about giving redress to the iwi that has suffered the breaches and omissions by the Crown in their rohe, in their district where they're from. So I think that's an important consideration and a fair question to ask of the Minister because as my colleague across the way there said, why create law when none is needed? And if it was a simple matter of changing the deed of settlement, we wouldn't have to have this within the Statutes Amendment Bill. I think also with reference to right of first refusal lands within the Settlement Act, there's a variety of time frames in the respective Settlement Acts. In this particular case, Ngāti Manuhiri have that right for 169 years, which is a very long time. Others that have been settled previously to this one have rights of refusal for 50 years, and that begs another question around relativity in these settlement acts, and I think it's important also to note that as part of this debate. I think also that the right of first refusal lands is a huge opportunity for iwi that have settled to grow the asset that they have received as part of their redress. And I mention that mainly because it is redress, it is not compensation. It's the opportunity to grow the asset within their tribal areas these kinds of sentiments are listed within the various acts, and indeed this one, and that's why I ask again, did the Minister consider changing the deed of settlement rather than changing the legislation? And if the government did consider that and decided not to, was it because that this would then set a precedent which would have to be applied to a number of other settlements and future settlements? I don't know how many Crown body-owned.
I call